Jeff, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
I'm delighted to be here, Mark. Thank you.
I'm trying to hold back so much from saying this is going to be a stoic type of event, but I couldn't. So along with my dad jokes, that's just what I do.
You're not the first, and you certainly won't be the last.
I've seen you in action when we were in Bahamas together, and I think what you're doing is super important. We were talking just before about what's happening in the world and different things going on, and I think everybody can make a difference in one way or another. There's no too little effort to make a difference out there, but you're making a big difference, and I want to get to it. But first, if you could briefly introduce yourself, aside from the business stuff, like where you're from originally, who are you, or where are you now, your family, something you've never told anybody you want to reveal to the world now. What the hell?
The big reveal. This is the moment, huh?
This is it.
This is the moment.
Go for it.
Well, good stuff, Mark. Was again really, really happy to be here. I equally love your work. I didn't get to see you speak in the Bahamas, but you and I got enough time on the margins to really leave me with some inspiration and interest in working with you, because I think we've got a lot of values in common. Jeff Stoike, born and raised in lovely San Diego, California, and currently residing in Austin, Texas, with my wife and our 4 kids, and have lived several continents, dozens of countries in the interim, and happy to get into that whole trajectory. But it's a big, beautiful world out there, and I've seen a lot of parts of it. I'm lucky to say.
Where'd you meet your wife?
We met in Athens, Georgia, of all places. Yeah, yeah.
Wasn't it Kenny Rogers' chicken place, was it?
It wasn't, but it was. I actually went to Kenny Rogers' farm 6 months after I met my wife for the first time. Yeah, a buddy of mine had a wedding there, of all places. Yeah,
at his restaurant.
I wasn't at his restaurant. He had this sort of event space. It wasn't quite a B&B, but beautiful ranch and photogenic as all get out.
No, I've heard. I like Kenny Rogers. He seems to be a good guy. Well, you mentioned your 4 kids, boys, girls.
Girl at the top, and then 3 boys picking up the rear.
All right, good stuff. So, with that said, you obviously know what they're like. What were you like as a kid or teenager? Were you like organizing projects? Were you the lemonade stand guy? Did you read a lot, swim a lot?
Yeah. I definitely read a lot. But I'd say more than anything, I was playing a lot of sports. There was nothing that didn't interest me as a kid. But I'd say what was distinctive about my upbringing was my interest in adventuring, and that could have been anything from walking the dogs in the canyons in my neighborhood and just spending hours getting lost in the canyons, to international travel that my mother and I did. And I owe her a lot of credit for the interest that she piqued in me at an early age. She was an inveterate traveler. She had traveled the world multiple times by the time I was born, and she and I continued that pace and pattern. And shoestring budget travel, but she'd find the cheapest flight to a place where we could car camp or get a cheap accommodations in Southeast Asia somewhere, and we'd go, just her and I. She was a nurse, and so she was able to work nights and weekends during the year, and then save away 1 to 2 months of paid time off during the summer, and off we'd go. So I'd come back to whatever the subsequent grade was that I was entering in September, and these kids would say, "Oh, I was at soccer camp, or I was at surf camp," and that's fine and good. My kids will do plenty of soccer camp and surf camp, but I was coming back from Bali, or we did a drive in a 4x4 with a camper shell and slept in the back all the way up to Denali, and those sorts of adventures as a kid. So I was very, very privileged. We weren't staying in 5-star hotels, but I was living a very, very rich life.
It would never have been the same or learned as much staying in a 5-star hotel.
No chance.
Wow, that's a great mom. Is she available to lease out?
I wish. I mean, the best that we can do is keep her memory fresh. She passed away about a decade ago, but she she lived fast and bright and had a full, joyous life. And so I'm happy to tell stories and share inspiration from my time with her. I was very, very fortunate. She had me late in life as a single mom, wasn't planning on it. And we both were absolutely delighted the way things played out.
That's a great story. And what an education. I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, gives me the segue to go to education and your journey. I mean, you were Berkeley,
Mhm.
bachelor's there, then you got your master's, University of Georgia, and then your doctorate at Yale. What were you envisioning at that time that actually led you to founding two initiatives, and also the difference making you did in the whole Yale world?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I don't know if I had a plan from the start or a vision from the start, Mark. I'd like to think that this was all strategic and
Yeah,
laid
right.
in front of me, but it wasn't. It was very sort of inductive and me going with my gut as much as my mind, my heart as much as my mind. A lot of times, um, my different chapters in life were very relationship driven. I'd meet someone that I'd really resonate with and I would find inspiration with and feel that I could complement well if we worked together and collaborated.
Hmm.
And I think that's a reflection of just my general orientation in life. I'm very open to various inputs and am interested in getting a breadth of experience as much as a depth of experience. And that's odd to say for someone with a PhD. A PhD typically go an inch wide and a mile deep, and that's never really been the case for me. Even in Berkeley, I was living in a vegetarian co-op and playing football at the same time. Right, so I'd go have my quinoa pilaf for dinner, and then go up the hill to Memorial Coliseum and work out, right?
And you were probably better shape and better able because of that.
Prep well, yes, yes. I mean, I probably wasn't able to pack on quite the pounds, but yeah, I think my arteries are in better shape as a result. Skipping the steak dinners, but yeah, and then after that, I had some tremendous relationships that came out of my time at Berkeley. I mean, it was an incredibly formative experience, and uh, three of those friends, another one came out a year or two later. We all migrated out to Georgia, to the southeast, and started a sustainable agriculture project there. Coffee importing from an indigenous reserve in Ecuador, and a farming project based in the southeast, trying to support sustainable family farms. Opened a restaurant, had a CSA, built this incredible network out there with these friends that I'd migrated out with from Berkeley. Um, and uh, and it was while I was there that I sort of fell backwards into graduate school. We were working closely with an agroecology professor there that had the land that we were farming, and you know how conversations are. You're sitting on the back porch and you're exchanging ideas. He said, "Well, you should consider getting a master's or a PhD." And so I considered it, and then ended up doing the master's at Georgia. It's a long, long story, and then met through that project. I was in Panama at the Smithsonian,
Of
working
course.
on indigenous issues and sustainability, and met some folks from Yale. And they said, "You should come up to Yale." And so I applied and got in. Was very fortunate to spend my time working with some incredible professors there and running a grant making institution, an institute there, working on local level capacity building around renewable energy and forestry and agriculture, and doing some incredible work in my field site in Brazil. I did my dissertation in Brazil, ended up making some relationships with government and research and nonprofits, and did some consulting work after my PhD. So my academic experience was diverse, was interdisciplinary, always with an interest in application, right? Not wanting, I published a bit, but I was never really driven by that publisher perish ethos. I really wanted to get my work out into the world and into the hands of the people who were making decisions, and could utilize it in the near term, right? And again, not to disparage those who are publishing in peer-reviewed journals, because that is a critical institution and service to humanity. A lot of what I'm doing now relies on their good and brilliant
Oh,
work.
sure.
So that's just my inclination about relationships and making productive connections with individuals, between sectors, between nations, for example. Um, And not to get ahead of you, but that's sort of what took me into DC ultimately, was to sort of zoom out and look at these issues around sustainable development from 30,000 feet and a real power nexus in DC.
Yeah, it's quite amazing because I know a lot of people do have a specific strategic. I went into accounting and I hated it, but I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And then I went to Deloitte and stuff. But I also had diversity. And I think what you said about diverse things, um, it may not have been the path you envisioned, but you were being seen you were seeing so many different things that you were able to say all of a sudden you found a passion in that one, but then you also found a connection to this one, and so on and so forth. And it gives me a good segue to, our firm was launched based on the premise that all types of organizations can do way better when they're doing good at the same time, whether it's for profit or what I call social profit, because I don't like the non part. You had an early understanding what that meant, the interconnection of international development, organizational leadership, how you were just talking about academia and entrepreneurship and corporates and social profits can come together. In fact, it's a way better to come together to get stuff done. Describe some of your experiences, what you learned about, economic, social, and environmental impact being able to be even greater by being together, and being able to be more sustainable by being together.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I think both from that very privileged academic perspective, um, and also from a very privileged policymaking perspective in DC after I left the academy,
Mhm.
um, I was able to take not just a landscape view, but a long view on sustainability. Oftentimes we think about sustainability as a balance between development and conservation, right? Use of natural resources and preservation of natural resources. But the key piece there is the temporal one, right? What happens over time? You can have the most amazing innovation, whether it's a social innovation or a technological innovation, in a given circumstance, in a given context, but contexts always change, right? And so what's the durability element? What's the longevity element of literally sustainability? And so I was able to study that as an academic. I was able to look at that through some tremendous resources during my time in DC at a think tank and at the State Department. And I think I got an idea. I certainly got an idea of what didn't work, what doesn't work, and that's, imposing external views on a local setting, right? Coming in from a very sort of import oriented perspective. We're the experts. Let
Right.
us be united people how this should work, right? Not, a very non-dialogical process. And so what I've tried to do in our current work with Blue Action and our, as sometimes we call a nonprofit, but is a social profit, and in your parlance, and our for-profit, we see how important it is to be doing those projects and working those processes in tandem, right? So just to give a little bit more texture to this,
Yeah, please.
our nonprofit or our social profit is doing capacity building, it's doing ecosystem restoration, it's doing environmental education, it's doing workforce training and development, not just in the Bahamas, but in other jurisdictions as well. So that there's a real social infrastructure and a groundwork and foundation for what we're doing with our for-profit. Our for-profit is bringing best in class climate solutions sourced from around the world and implementing them where they are needed most, on the front lines of climate change. And in the Bahamas, a low-lying coral atoll in Hurricane Alley safely said the front lines of climate change. But you can't just bring these companies in, as I said, and implement them. You need to have local buy-in,
Right.
right? Saying, yes, we welcome that, but also you need to have a workforce that has the skills to support an industry that you're trying to build. We're not looking to just have a demonstration project. Like we're trying to build industries and economies that we think are going to underpin the global economy for the next 50 years or so. And so you need to have world-class ideas, world-class resources, world-class technologies, but you also have to have this sort of indigenous and organic capacity. And in many cases, it's already there and it's just a matter of aligning, right? I'm not saying that we're coming in and building that from scratch, but we're bringing resources to bear so that these communities and these ecosystems can flourish, especially as we're bringing in these large scale technologies to deploy.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We work with a few companies, especially that do great workforce development, what we call untapped talent. And you don't necessarily have to. You should go to college if you can, you want to, or whatever. But it doesn't make you less valuable if you don't go to college and you just fill up some skills training that's really valuable, and the impact it has on so many people in the community and in the country, et cetera, that they're actually making a difference economically and socially for their community. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the type of work or the type of things that you see happening, with the blue economy and what you're doing with Blue Action Lab, what you're even doing with Anacapa Strategies that are creating, all the things I just talked about.
Yeah. So we have an admittedly ambitious, maybe even audacious vision for what we're doing with Blue Action. And Anacapa Strategies is my personal consulting firm that we use to bring resources to Blue Action as well. But the real thrust of our work is through the Blue Action umbrella, and that's, as I mentioned, sort of capacity building on the ground. That's bringing in best-in-class technologies to deploy them where they're needed most, and that is to build this pipeline or ecosystem of climate solution innovations, right? Because while we were on the ground, and keep in mind, our work, as you and I were talking before the call, was born out of a disaster, right? It was born out of a Category 5 hurricane that sat on top of the island of Grand Bahama and the city of Freeport for, I think, 36 hours, right? A horrifically powerful storm, horrifically destructive storm, and created this reset moment, this sort of square one moment for the free trade zone in Freeport, for the people of Grand Bahama. And so we came in immediately trying to just staunch the bleeding, literally and figuratively, and bring some lifeblood back to the economy there, but not go back to business as usual, oil and gas transshipment, cruise port development, but create a new economic trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And so in doing that, we realized that we couldn't just play defense, going from hurricane disaster area to hurricane disaster area around the world and doing disaster relief, as critical as that is. But we also needed to play offense as much as defense and think ahead, right? How can we stimulate a sort of innovation economy around climate solutions that would be applicable in Grand Bahama and address issues in Grand Bahama, but also use that experience in Grand Bahama as a springboard to deploying elsewhere in the world, and ultimately at scale, globally, and on a timeline that can address this climate crisis. And so as we're doing that, we're bringing companies in that can deploy these solutions, but realizing that there wasn't really enough of a climate resilience and climate mitigation industry for us to do that. And so we partnered with a group called Founders Factory out of London and New York to build this pipeline and build this ecosystem of technology, early stage technology, right? What we're doing right now is we're investing in and we're providing early stage critical business development support to these pre-seed and seed stage companies so that they can flourish and so they can get to a level of maturation where they can deploy at scale and quickly. So I think that's the vision, right? Doing the local level work in all of these various contexts around the world so that there's a social infrastructure there, and then taking these solutions and deploying them where they're needed most, but also trying to stay ahead of the curve, right? Because it's a moving target.
That's for sure.
Constantly seeding this next generation of technologies that can serve as best in class in 5-10 years and address the solutions as they emerge.
Yeah, it's fascinating because they say the fourth industrial revolution is about tech, AI, virtual reality, and whatnot, but the fifth is really about humanity. And AI is faster moving than fast right now in all sorts of aspects. We're seeing how much we're dependent on tech. We were just talking about it with the whole global outage right now, today, July 2024, that one little thing stopped airlines, banks, Times Square, everything went down, which is really, really scary. Share your thoughts about what you see happening in the world with respect to things like AI, the opportunities and challenges for people's lives, because we are talking, all of this is supposed to be for the good of people, not people working for tech or for other stuff. How you see it affecting business, jobs, and for that matter, our mental health, mental and physical health that impacts families and communities too. It's a whole, humanity's a big thing.
Yeah. Well, you're not giving me any softball questions, are you here, Mark? I
You don't
love
get
it.
softball questions. I play hockey. You don't get softball questions.
Straight for the jugular. I love it. We're not sitting here wasting our time, that's for sure. I mean, these are great, critical questions. And just to be perfectly candid, yeah, I was raised by a self-proclaimed Luddite mother, right? She was an anti-technologist, and I think that sensibility stuck with me to a certain degree. And granted, I'm working in venture capital and I'm working in climate tech, but that doesn't mean I'm completely bought in to that as an ideology and as a panacea for the world's problems.
Oh, sure.
Like anything else, capitalism, language, like these are tools that we use. And guess who's holding the tools? It's a human being, right?
Right.
And so I think your question gets to a tremendously important point, and that we need to be investing in humanity. We need to be investing in the humanities. I mean, right now, higher education is going through a bit of a crisis moment, right? But the humanities in higher education has been going through a crisis moment in terms of funding for years, if not decades. I mean, the focus has really been on STEM, which is a feeder into tech. And these are, again, critical tools, but you must have a foundation. You must be building good, ethical, critical thinking human beings before you put them in labs to develop these incredibly powerful technologies, right? An interesting analogy was, heard years ago with reference to geoengineering, direct air capture, basically climate engineering to address climate change, large scale carbon capture, right? Is you can solve the engineering problem and develop a switch to turn off climate change, right? But what are you doing to develop the proper critical thinking and the proper moral constitution of the person that has their finger on that switch?
Right.
Because we always thought about that with the president and the red button around the nukes. Well, you know what? Now we've got a lot of people with their fingers on very powerful switches, whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's large scale geoengineering, right? So what are we doing to make sure that we're feeding ourselves as a human species? And so, if I may,
Please.
little bit of a sidebar, I'm all in on trying to steer capital towards the right technical solutions to address climate change. But that's not all I'm doing. I've got a little bit of a side project on social media, and media, more aptly described as media for social impact, right? You refer to a social profit instead of a nonprofit. This is, how can the juggernaut that is media and Hollywood, that we all consume in one form or another to a significant degree, how can that juggernaut be used to advance social good and promote critical thinking, promote liberal democratic ideas, promote sensible solutions to climate change, promote a real value around the humanities? And so I'm working with a couple different folks in the industry to get effective content out into the world to seed hearts and minds, not just create engines and factories and drones to address climate change, but to to plant seeds in people and have effective messaging to leave someone when they close their laptop after binge watching a show thinking, I feel different than when I watched that before. And I want to do something different when I get up in the morning, right? Whether that's composting or beekeeping in your backyard, or whether that's starting a social profit or running for a school board or launching a climate tech startup, right?
Sure.
How can media be an engine for social and environmental good? Because as important as technology is, what got us here is not going to get us there, right? It's not the end all be all. And so we have to make sure that we're taking a sort of holistic and humanistic view on these problems and
Well,
solutions.
it's like anything, isn't it? These are all tools, and how are we using them,
Yeah.
basically, for good, bad, or otherwise. I mean, that's part of the mindset of having a Leaders Who Care series, is to get the mindset out that you can actually do better business-wise or social profit-wise if you are doing good at the same time. You don't have to be just taking less money and struggling to do good, or just be greedy and only make money and have no purpose in life, type of thing. And media can play a big part in this, and it's one of the reasons also that we're even bringing 8 to 18-year-olds now on Leaders Who Care, who are what we call the present future leaders who care, because they're no longer just future, they're actually doing stuff now, as you were saying. So one thing we do say in LA is we leave them wanting with more so we can do a sequel, so we may have to do that. But I do have one last question here. A client told me in 2021, he said, Mark, with the pandemic and everything, the year 2020, it was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought it was really a cool, and one of those cool oxymorons or whatever you would call that type of thing. But we're already in 2024. The pandemic seems like it was yesterday and years ago, all at the same time. And with that, share with us what you're most grateful for, and also what are you most hopeful for?
Mm. It might be the same answer, and sort of born out of the pandemic. Um, so it's really my kids, right? I'm so fortunate to have these incredible young sources of vitality, right? As much as they drain me, they give me a sense of vitality, and that was very much born not just from the pandemic, right? That sort of space time distortion that happened, but I had a personal health crisis in 2018. I sort of went through my own personal pandemic. Spent 9 months in the hospital, had to wear a mask all the time. I was wearing masks before it was the cool thing to do, because my immune so compromised, and that was a real sort of reset moment for me personally, and led me to move back to my home state of California and start the family, really focus on what mattered most. I was busy in DC working in the world, doing big
Yeah.
things in the world, or so I thought. But I wanted more than anything to be a father and a family man, and so I had my personal crisis and committed to starting a family, and then the pandemic hit, and we went through that experience during this incredible space-time distortion. And so now we sort of all went through that bizarre experience together. And I hate to say it, but it won't be the last, right? We'll be going through it in one way, shape, or form again, whether it's a climate crisis, whether it's an infectious disease crisis, whether it's a political crisis, and very likely multiple at the same time, right? So how do we respond to those sorts of situations? Um, I'm grateful and hopeful that I've got this generation coming up behind me that I can hopefully inspire and teach something to, but then also watch go out into the world and do great things, because I think we as individuals and as a species are remarkably creative and resilient. We've created a heck of a mess right now, and but I've seen what we've done in the past, and I know that this is not insurmountable, and it's just a matter of getting our values lined up and putting resources behind it and really committing to it. And we'll have another issue in the next generation or two or three, but there's nothing that we can't get done as a species, and I know that every time I look in my kids' eyes.
Yeah, well said. And Some people say, well, I don't want to bring kids into this world. I say that's actually the greatest reason to bring kids into this world, is that they'll bring new ideas, fresh stuff, energy, the whole bit to it. So I'm grateful that you're a new friend and a leader who cares and doing great work. So thanks for sharing all that, and we really appreciate all you're doing.
Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough for having me on, but for doing the work that you do, because I think this is what's so desperately needed, right? It's a cold, hard world out there sometimes, but ultimately, every single one of us has a heart beating inside, and we're hungering for that human connection, and we're not going to do our highest and best work if we don't acknowledge that and feed that. So, thank you for doing what you're doing.
I appreciate that. Onward, right?
Onward and upwards.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.